So if you have been following all the buzz about the new ESG regulations in EU, you must have definitely heard about the EU Green Deal, Omnibus proposal, the new due diligence and reporting requirements, and there is one name which must have constantly popped up everywhere, which is none other than CSRD, the Corporate Sustainability Reporting Directive. Now, CSRD is one of the most complicated ESG reporting frameworks that have been come up till now, and if you're in Europe or any other part of the world, you must have a good understanding of CSRD reporting because it applies not just to EU based companies but companies all over the world who fulfill certain thresholds. So if you want to make an impactful career in ESG and sustainability, knowing the basics of CSRD and how you can prepare a company's report basis CSRD, or how you can analyze and refer to a CSRD based sustainability report is very, very important. So in today's video, we'll break down CSRD in the most simplistic way and understand what it is, who does it apply to, and why it's that one concept which every ESG professional must know before applying for any ESG or sustainability job. So let's get started. Hi guys, welcome back to Gen Sustainable, and today's video is all about CSRD reporting. Now before we jump into CSRD and understanding what it is, let's take a step back and understand why CSRD was introduced in the first place. Now we all know that Europe has always been on the forefront of sustainability related frameworks and disclosures, and a few years back companies in EU were already required to report on their non-financial disclosures under something called as NFRD, the Non-Financial Reporting Directive. Now the intent was totally great, but what happened was that there was no standardized procedure for disclosures, so companies started focusing on whatever they wanted. Some focused on emissions, some focused on social impact, and some just decorated their reports with fancy CSR stories. And what this resulted into, it was like comparing apples to bananas and oranges and all the different fruits in the fruit basket all at once, because investors, shareholders, and all the stakeholders could not really compare the performance of different companies basis the disclosures that they had provided basis NFRD. And that's where the Corporate Sustainability Reporting Directive, or CSRD, comes into picture to standardize all of the reporting all across EU member countries. Now, CSRD intends to fill three major gaps. The first is consistency, so that everyone reports basis the same framework, so the disclosures across companies are consistent. The next one is reliability. Now, this data has to undergo third-party assurance just like financial data, so you know that the company is providing the most accurate data available. And the third one is comparability. Now, since all the companies are reporting basis the same standard and same framework, you can compare different companies for the same parameter. For example, if you take emissions, you can compare the emissions caused by different companies in the IT sector. You can compare water withdrawal for different companies in FMCG sector, and so on. And if you must be following the EU sustainability news and know all of these words like the EU Green Deal, Omnibus proposal, Sustainable Finance Disclose Regulations, SFRD, you would know that Europe is building an entire ecosystem around sustainability, and CSRD is the backbone of this ecosystem, because all of these regulations melt down in one pot, which is the annual sustainability report, wherein companies need to disclose the initiatives taken by them related to ESG and sustainability that align with all of these different frameworks. And that makes CSRD a little more complicated than your usual ESG related framework. And CSRD literally applies to all the companies, whether you're European, global, big or small. In a phase-wise manner, CSRD is going to be applicable to most companies operating in Europe. So now we know that the foundation of CSRD is that EU wants sustainability related data to be taken as seriously as financial data, and it wants all the companies, whether they are big, small, listed, non-listed, large companies or SMEs, European or global, everyone to report on same comparable framework, so that there is transparent data available to all the stakeholders. Okay, so now that we know why CSRD was introduced, let's get to the basics of CSRD and understand what it exactly is. Now, CSRD stands for Corporate Sustainability Reporting Directive, and it is a framework provided adopted by the EU, basis which companies can disclose on their sustainability related initiative. Now, just like any other sustainability framework like GRI or BRSR, CSRD has its own set of material topics and subtopics basis which companies need to disclose the data. And this data further needs to be third party verified so that you provide an assurance to your stakeholder that this data is true and reliable. And why CSRD is so important? Because earlier under the NFRD, only 11,000 companies were liable for reporting. But now with CSRD, in a phased-wise manner, more than 50,000 companies will have to report sustainability related disclosures basis the CSRD framework. Second, the CSRD has introduced ESRS, which are the European Sustainability Reporting Standards, and ESRS is like the rule book for CSRD. Now, ESRS has different material topics for environment, social, and governance, basis which the companies need to report on. And the third most important thing here is that assurance is mandatory for all the reports basis CSRD. And finally, the most important component of CSRD is that CSRD looks beyond its own operation and requires reporting on the entire value chain. So you need to take into consideration the risks, impacts, opportunities of the entire value chain, right from your sourcing partners, your own operations and manufacturing, to your distributors and customers when you are reporting basis CSRD. And this, I think, is huge because CSRD recognizes that the company's sustainability impact is not just through its own operations, but through its entire value chain, from its suppliers, transport partners, or even how its customers uses its products. And now the big question, who exactly has to report basis the CSRD reporting framework? Now, there has been a lot of confusion around this because of the new Omnibus proposal, which reduced the scope of the companies who were required originally to report basis CSRD. But since Omnibus proposal is not yet finalized, let us just have a look at what was originally proposed for reporting basis CSRD framework. So as you can see on the screen, for the financial year 2024, large listed companies having more than 500 employees had to report basis the CSRD report, and all of these companies were earlier part of the NFRD report, and the data for 2024 would obviously be reported at the beginning of the year 2025. Now the next phase is for the large listed and unlisted companies and consolidated groups that meet at least two of the three criteria, which is more than 250 employees, revenue of more than 25 million euros, or more than 50 million euro in turnover. The third phase is for FY 2026, where listed small and medium-sized enterprise had to report except micro company. And finally, in the year 2028, listed large subsidiaries, third country companies, and listed SME subsidiary third country companies with turnover more than 150 million euros for the last 2 consecutive years. So if you're not a European company and yet operating in Europe and have generated more than 40 million euros the previous year, then you also need to report it during this timeline. So now you understand why CSRD is important, whether you're a small company, big company, listed, unlisted, European or global. It is eventually going to apply to everyone operating in Europe. However, in the year 2024, there was a lot of pushback from a lot of companies because of the complexity of the CSRD regulations and to prepare themselves for reporting basis CSRD. Hence, the Omnibus proposal had come up, and you can obviously check the link for Omnibus proposal video here and understand what the proposal exactly had mentioned. So now that we know all of these basics about CSRD, let's get to the main point, that what exactly needs to be reported under CSRD. Now, like we discussed, the ESRS framework is the rule book basis which you need to report on CSRD. So now ESRS has several standards. So let's begin with ESRS 1 and ESRS 2. So ESRS 1 is the general requirements and ESRS 2 is the general disclosures basis which the companies need to report on. Then moving to ESRS 2, companies need to report on the identified impacts, risks and opportunities, their ESG related strategy and the metrics and targets. So ESRS 2 basis basically gives a guideline basis which all of the material topics need to be reported on. Like you need to disclose on the governance structure around each of the material topics, the impacts, risks, and opportunities identified for each of the material topics, strategy for the topic, as well as the matrix and targets identified for each of the topics. Then comes the E section. Now in the E or the environment section, there are 5 material topics or 5 ESRS standards basis which the companies need to make their reporting. So the first one, ESRS E1, is related to climate change, and it has a host of disclosures which you need to report on to align your report with climate change. Then ESRS E2 is pollution, ESRS E3 is water and marine resources, ESRS E4 is biodiversity and ecosystem, and ESRS E5 is resource use and circular economy. Then coming to the social section. In the social section, the ESRS S1 is about the own workforce, ESRS S2 is about workers in value chain, ESRS S3 is about affected communities, and ESRS S4 is customers and end users. And the last one is the governance pillar, under which we have ESRS G1, which is related to business conduct. So broadly, these are the 10 ESRS standards and the 2 general disclosure standards basis which companies need to report or disclose their report on. Now, all of these standards together have about 1,140 subtopics on which the companies need to make their disclosures. Now, some of these disclosures are qualitative disclosures, some are quantitative disclosures, and a lot of disclosures are similar to what is demanded in GRI, but the requirement of CSRD is much more comprehensive than GRI for the same indicator. So if you're already reporting basis CSRD, be rest assured that your report will already be aligned to a lot of other reporting frameworks like GRI. So now that you know all of these things about CSRD, so if you're someone who is preparing for job interview, these are some points that you need to prepare well for any questions related to CSRD and ESRS. First one, you need to understand the difference between what is CSRD and what is ESRS. So broadly, CSRD is the regulation which mandates sustainability disclosures for the companies, but ESRS is the framework which provides a guideline on what parameters the companies should report on. The next important aspect is understanding double materiality assessment and how it is conducted. The third one is knowing what the different material topics or what the ESRS frameworks are basis which the companies need to disclose. And third, you need to know what is demanded by the Omnibus proposal if the Omnibus proposal comes into action. And whether you're in India and working in an Indian company or aiming for job in Indian company, you still need to have a good understanding of CSRD, because a lot of Indian companies who have their operations in Europe will eventually have to disclose basis CSRD. So companies are looking for talent who understand CSRD reporting very well. So that's all for today's video. I hope you liked the video and you found it insightful, and do let me know in the comments if you have any questions related to CSRD reporting, or if you want me to pick each of the ESRS framework in detail and show how the reporting disclosures are done. And also let me know in the comments what are some other topics that you would like me to cover on Gen Sustainable. So till we come back with another video, stay impactful, stay Gen Sustainable. Bye bye.